Warning: the following video clip contains offensive and vulgar language, such as fuck, bitch, and whore. Viewer discretion is advised. You cheeky bastard.
Alright, to install the paddle shifters on the 370Z, I have a 2015, and it didn't come with the paddle shifters. It's the base model. From 2014 and below, they came with paddle shifters already with the 370s if you got the base model. 2015, to cut costs and save money, and they got rid of the paddle shifters and the things that they thought was unnecessary, unless you wanted to add them as extra in the package. So I bought these on eBay. They're like brand new. Got them used from a wreck 370Z. Most people don't use their paddle shifters a lot, so buying used is a good alternative rather than paying like 400 bucks brand new. Then I got the shroud. You're gonna need a lower shroud if you don't want to Dremel into your existing one. So what this consists of is this large cutout on this side and the same on the opposite end. And then you have these side panels that actually clip onto here for the left and right side, and basically your paddle will stick out through that little slot. And so once you got these pieces, these all came together as a unit. This was separately. It did not come with the screws or bolts that you're going to need to mount this. But as I install it, I'll show you what you're going to need. And I believe it takes one nut for the top, because there's a stud that sticks out. And then you're going to need a bolt for the side. And I'm not sure if there's going to be one that goes in there. Throughout the video, I'll show you the process, and then you could kind of figure it out after that. Okay, so some of the parts you're going to need also is you're going to need a number 6. It's a metric bolt, and this one was 3/4 inches long, and I cut it down to 1/2 inch because on the other end of the nut that this one bolts up to, it's an acorn nut. Next, you're going to want a number 10 socket for these, if you get them in the hex head. If not, you could also get them in a Phillips, but I wanted the hex head so that way I could tighten them a little bit better. If you have this size and you don't want to cut it down, you could also add a washer to this, or another nut on this side, so that way it takes up the gap. But I cut it down, and then I'm going to belt sand this smooth, and it would be okay. You could also add a lock washer to this if you don't want to cut it down, only because you're going to probably want some way to hold it, so when you're shifting, there's no vibrations that are going to eventually back this out over a long period of time. And that brings me to Loctite. So this brand, you could use, I'm going to use 242 Loctite. It's basically the blue Loctite, but this one is Vibrotite, same thing. 240, you're going to need a Phillips number 2, and then you're going to need some extensions to get through the steering wheel on the side. You probably only need maybe this one, if that, maybe a little shorter. But so I'm just going to use this, and so that way it makes it a lot easier. So when you're tightening these bolts down in this nut, it's able to clear the steering wheel to as you're adding the paddle shifters onto the side of your steering column. Okay, so the first thing you're going to want to do in the vehicle is you're going to want to make sure the steering column is all the way in the up position, and then lock it, so that way you could have access to this bottom panel a lot easier. And then what you're going to do is start the car, and you're going to pop out these tabs here, but you're going to want to turn the wheel so that way the top of the steering wheel is facing each tab. So there's one on this side, one on the other side, and you're going to use a number 2 Phillips to take off the bolt that's holding this cover on. So let me start the car and turn the wheel, and I'll show you. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is start the engine, turn the wheel sideways just like that, and now you're going to be able to access this panel. The way you're going to want to take that off is with either a flat blade screwdriver or some type of panel removal tool, but I'm going to use a flat blade screwdriver to pop this panel out. What I like to do is I like to pop it out from the top, since that's where there's a clip, or not a clip but a little tab that holds this in, and if you pop it out from here you won't damage your plastics. Okay, so you want to make sure you got a real thin flat blade head, and then what I'm going to do is I put it on the top side on the back, push it in and twist it out just like that. So when you put it in, you could twist it and it'll pop right out. And then what's gonna happen, if you look closely, it kinda, let that focus, kinda scratches it a little bit, but not too bad. So it's the best way to do it without really having to buy new pieces. But right here and right here there's tabs, and those tabs are at the top and the bottom of this. So I try to get it up in this corner, and then I pried it out because I know that was where one of the tabs are. If you start prying from, like, say, the center, what's going to happen is you're going to pry it, and you're going to have to put more pressure on it because you're trying to pop them both out at the same time, and that's going to damage your caps a lot easier than the way I did it. Now what you want to do is, as you can see, there's a Phillips head in there. Let me get you closer. So there's a Phillips head, and what you want to do is you just take your screwdriver and take off the take out the screw. So after you take out the two on the top, there's this one at the very bottom underneath the lower cover. As you can see, it's under here. There's one Phillips head bolt. So after you take off this one, and then this other side up here, you pop those off, there's the one underneath. So it's like directly underneath the steering wheel. So directly under here there's a bolt. It's a Phillips number 2, same as these ones on the side. So you take those off. I forgot to mention that. So you want to do that to both sides of the of your plastic. Get both screws out. Now what you're going to do is you're going to try to work this plastic down like that. So I grabbed it right here, and I just work it down. You want to have this column all the way in the up position, so that way you could get under here and put your hand where that little lever is and pull down on the rest of the plastic. So you just work it out like this, and then work the opposite end, and eventually you'll get your plastic shroud to come loose. If it's hard to grab and pull down on the opposite end, start your vehicle, turn your steering wheel around, so that way you have access to this, and you can put your thumb there and pull down on it, and then it allows you to get more leverage and easily take this side panel off. This side panel to take off and put on will probably be the hardest part of this installation process. So let me get it off and then I'll show you. Okay, so once you turn your wheel so that way you could get both sides of the tab, this is gonna touch on here. So you just want to rotate your wheel just to get it to pop out. So I pried it in this direction away from this this housing, and then I turned my wheel the other way and did the same thing, and it allowed it to pop down. And then your whole housing will pop off. And as you can see, the paddle shifters are going to install here on this stud, here on this nut. There's a nut behind there that's welded onto here. And then you're going to disconnect this wire off the tape. So here's your paddle shifter harness. So you untape it and it's right there. Then just repeat the process on the other side. Okay, so the first thing you want to do when applying the paddle shifter, I end up finding some washers that would fit on here. Let's see if you can see it. So they fit okay, and they're the right size for this number 6 screw. So what I'm going to use these for is you're going to need 4 of these washers as well if you want to use the washers. The only reason why I decided to use the washer is because there's a metal insert right here that's like kind of fused in with the plastic, and I kind of wanted to grab this whole face instead of just, you know, applying a lot of pressure on this metal surface and then over time it tearing through. Same thing with this one. I guess these right here don't connect to anything, so I wanted to show you was the acorn nut. It's the acorn nut that I was telling you about. So there's a limit to how long your bolt could be. So I'm using the bolt right here with the nut and a washer, and I'm using a bolt with the washer on here, and I cut it to 1/2 inch to fit in. So that's where that's going. So first thing you want to do is slide this in like that, and then once you have it in, you're going to put the bolt in this side, and let me grab the bolt. You're going to want to grab the bolt and put Loctite on it. 242 or 243, the blue stuff. So put a little bit at the end of the threads. Get this started. Once it gets started, just thread it all the way in there, and then use your wrench. You're not going to need an extension for this one. Just the socket and the ratchet will do perfectly fine. So once that's in there like that, you take the number 10. I'm using 1/4 inch drive only because you don't need to really torque this thing down, and it's easier to use in these little confined spots. So tighten it snug and then give it a 1/4 inch turn, and then from there we're gonna put on the nut and the other washer. So slide the nut on first, slide the washer on first, and let me see if you can see that. So as you can see right there, it fits in there perfect. Put some thread locker either on this, or you could put it on the nut, whichever is easiest for you, and then thread this on, and then we're gonna tighten it down. So let me set this down here so then that way you can see. It's gonna be kind of hard to see because I only have 2 hands. I don't have nobody else helping me. So I'm gonna put some thread locker on here